I'll hand over to Tova, who is going to take the panellists through today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you, Richard, as well. It's not often that I sympathise with press officers, but boy, oh boy, the RB comms team has probably got stumps for fingernails after that. Thank you very much, Adrian, as well. We have a rockstar panel today, the big issues. It's a conference obviously full of highlights, and this is a highlight of the highlights. We're going to have a thought-provoking, thought-leading, thought-challenging discussion, and we'll start with the big politics and policies in New Zealand. Laurie, do you want to kick us off, starting with the elephant in the room, or the big neon light with fireworks behind it, business confidence?
Oh boy, that one. There's been a lot of talk about business confidence over the last few months, and I'm from NZIER, the Institute of Economic Research, and one of the causes of that talk was a thing that we do, which is called the Quarterly Survey of Business Opinion, which is something that we've been running since 1961. Adrian was involved in it, I think, when he worked for NZIER back in the black and white days. So this is a bit of a misnomer, because it's not just a survey of opinion; it's a whole raft of measures. I mean, there's all the stuff that that Amy Adams talked about earlier today. In fact, do you intend to hire? Are your customers opening their wallets? What's your capital plan looking like for the next few months? So it's a whole grab bag of stuff that's run quarterly. And what we're seeing from that, as we ran it over the last year, is that there is a softening of confidence, both in terms of the high level overall measure of confidence, but if you drill down from that to some of the indicators, some things are changing. And the first thing that I would say is this is not a catastrophe, and I've seen some of the things, forgive me, in the press which have suggested that the country's going to hell in a handbasket, and that just isn't true. I mean, growth is still pretty positive. Things are pretty good here. They're a little bit off plateau, sure, but you would expect that. You would expect that after 12 years of a bull run since the global financial crisis. But what has changed recently is some of the risks have increased, some of the downside risks have increased, and by that I mean we look at trading. Is trading activity getting better or worse? Well, last couple of quarters it started heading south. The companies aren't as active as they were. The profitability has been hit, particularly in some sectors, in a way that it wasn't a year or so ago. And in some sectors we're seeing already cost increases coming through. So construction would be an example of that, as would retail. So it's not desperately bad. It does seem to be inflecting, and it's very interesting that it's had the airplay that it's had over the last few months, because at the top level, actually things are still pretty okay.
Okay, what about some of the other politics or policies in New Zealand that we're facing today? Infrastructure, spending, transport, housing, immigration. Any of you could pick up on any of those topics?
Oh, the housing one's interesting, because I think all Kiwis care about housing. We all care about four walls and a roof, not only because it's somewhere to live, because traditionally that's how we've become wealthy. Felt wealthy. We put our money into houses, and that's one of the things that enables us to retire. You look at the stats, from Stats New Zealand, and the only category of house building or residence building that's flatlined over the last year is actually retirement villages, which certainly came as a surprise to me. Everything else is still doing pretty well. I mean, consents are increasing up here in Auckland and in the Waikato. Even in Wellington, consents are increasing. Good news for the folk down there. But I guess what I'm not seeing at the moment, which is a concern, is as much to address the thing that we are concerned about, which is affordability. The supply side stuff is great. Build lots of houses, that's all good. But if we look at the Kiwi Build stuff, they're going to be selling those things at $650. That's beyond the reach of most young couples. They might be good for $400 or $450 if they're on average incomes. And so what do you do about that? Because $650, it might as well be $750 or $1 million. You're not going to make those properties affordable for the people that you actually trying to reach. So, one thing that I'd like this room maybe to think about is, why don't we do more shared equity schemes in New Zealand? So they do them in other parts of the world. So this is where you own part of your house together with another organisation that's been created to hold the other part. So if you can't do $650, you can do $4. You buy 70% of something or 80% of something, and as you get richer, you can maybe buy more, or you need more space. You sell up, and you sell up that that portion of the equity. So you're in the market, it doesn't destabilize the prices too much, and at least it gets people into those four walls and a roof, which I think is really important for all kinds of reasons. So that's one thing I'd like to see here.
Adrian, you talked about climate change in your speech. New Zealand is slowly waking up. What's the outlook there?
It's not even the outlook, it's here, in the sense of what is happening around relative pricing, around regulatory behaviour, around investor and consumer demands. So it is here, and it is rapidly changing, and it's rapidly changing for the better. I cheekily say in the written version of the speech, the first economic textbook that I was given was Samuelson. I went as far as the front page. It was actually to see who had it before me. Remember at school, you used to have all the names of, and see if my brother had it. And on the front page it said, "Why are diamonds expensive and water is free?" That was the opening gambit. And that was done because it was meant to be about scarcity. You know, diamonds are scarce and water's always and everywhere. Well, we now know the answer was that De Beers run a cartel and a good marketing shop, and water was mispriced, and hence it's been misused and misallocated. And we call that the dairy industry. So, these are going to be the challenges for New Zealand. How do you put the proper price and internalise those prices so they're not externalities, they become internalised, they become endogenous to your behaviour, such as employing, training, worrying about the environment, all those things get truly properly priced. So the challenge for us means we're going to have to go much further up the value chain for everything we do, which is critical. Because if we just keep flogging that lowest commodity price because we're supposedly a cheap producer because we haven't actually paid for the inputs, then we will remain a low productive, low capital intensive misuser of resources.
Kirk, do you want to pick up on one of these questions from the floor? We've heard plenty We've heard plenty of talk about business confidence in New Zealand recently. What's your view on the reality of business in New Zealand?
God, that's a really tough one. I've been banned from talking about business confidence. Look, I mean, I'm kind of with Laurie a little bit. The headline activity is still really holding up well, but there are a lot of domestic risks that he's already talked about. But one of the biggest challenges that we haven't talked about is the international environment, and that's as a trading nation, those are some of the things that which will have the potential to have a big impact on us, and that's the face of the trade war, the potential trade war, or whatever they're calling it now, between China and the US. And so if you just think about this, at the moment it's really on, they've been talking about around $200 billion of tariffs. And the next phase of this tariffing process and the consequences of that will likely be in the area of agriculture. And what usually happens after tariffs occur is that subsidies are provided within those markets, those big markets. So, for example, if the EU gets pulled in, you're looking at around about, $170 billion worth of subsidies which will go into the EU agricultural sector, 20 billion up to 20 billion in the US from a subsidy perspective. They've already had 12 billion. So whilst I agree with some of Adrian's comments about the challenges of doing particular types of business in New Zealand, we're exposed to that market. We will need to transition and shift, and some of those things will really impact on us quite quickly, I think, if it goes down the dire track that it looks like it's going down at the moment. I mean, you've also got the opportunity side, though, which I think is really important. Does anyone in the room know how many free trade agreements New Zealand has? Any idea? 20, 50, 5, 3? We've got 9. So TPP basically...
Just going to say that.
Too slow. So TPP doubles our favourable market access to other markets. The EU coming on board in perhaps 2 or 3 years' time gives us another 27 effective markets, and then with Britain potentially, so that's 28. So the future really looks bright, but it's probably not the type of future that is. It's probably going to be quite a different future. We'll be focusing a lot on services. I think weightless exports. We've got the skills and the capacity to generate. I think some really amazing product out of New Zealand that can go to much bigger markets that will not restrict us in the way that commodities have in the past. So that's kind of an exciting future as we transition to a braver new world that prices in the externalities of our horticulture and agricultural production.
What about Australia? If we're ever feeling woeful about our politics, we need just look across the ditch. What are some of the uncertainties or the perhaps opportunities that Australia's new politics and policies might throw up for us?
Well, clearly some of the challenges are not economic ones, because what's happening at the moment is that the economic relationship with Australia remains pretty strong. I mean, it's still our second or third biggest trading partner, but the politics of that are starting to play at a people level, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And also by that I mean who you're dealing with as Prime Minister. Actually, that's a challenging people issue. I think the Australian economy. There was a report, and there's some one-offs in this number, but their quarterly growth was 0.9%, which tells you that there is a lot of strength still in their economy, and we benefit from that when they're doing well, predominantly because they're still one of our biggest trading partners. We're doing well, and so they're an important market for us. We need to sometimes just put the politics to one side, I think.
There was a question up there as well, it's just flicked off, but it was talking about, there it is, climate change, 169 trillion in debt, trade wars, Brexit, Turkey, Argentina, Venezuela. Are we really tracking okay? Adrian, do you want to pick up on that? Are
yes.
we? Go forth.
No,
are we tracking okay, given all of those geopolitical?
I think at any point in human history there are more things that could happen than will. And so you just happen to have named a few things. The opportunity side that Kirk mentioned around these challenges are just immense. They are fantastic, amazing opportunities for this country and for the human population. We generally like to go and look at the most nearest thing we can worry about. Debt is a big one. So I've pointed out a huge amount of issues and all on the record, but I just don't think the world is any more uncertain or more at risk than at any time. And I actually think the fact that we are now recognising and acknowledging some of these long-term risks, we might actually do something about it. Relative prices might shift, investor, consumer behaviours will change. So, and on the New Zealand economy, I mean, our most recent monetary policy statement, we've said global growth 3.9%, slowing to 3.5% over the next couple of years. We've got a fantastic terms of trade. We've got a supporting exchange rate. We've got low interest rates. We've got a government that's spending and investing. We've got capacity shortages always and everywhere, so we're needing to invest. And we've got a healthy, low unemployment rate where people are actually in real terms, growing their incomes. In nominal terms has been low, real terms because of low inflation. Get over ourselves, smell the roses. It's actually not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that as well, because we're really good at talking ourselves down in New Zealand. And you made the comment about Australia, and New Zealand's not Australia for a lot of good reasons, actually. And I think that confidence is a real issue, because investors invest in New Zealand and we need their money. We need international investment because we're too small to generate enough money to do the things that we want to do on our own. And they come here because we have a confidence, and because we're not corrupt, and because there's less layers between the people who make the decisions and the customer. Yeah, so there's more certainty. We have uniqueness here that we should celebrate, but we're the fastest, I think, in the world almost at talking ourselves down. So this lack of consumer confidence is not consumer confidence, that's one of it, but our own lack of business confidence is interesting, because there's not a lot of reason why, as Adrian talks about, but we risk speaking the international community if we don't believe in ourselves.
They're already spooked. I mean, we deal with investors predominantly from our Auckland office out of NZIER, and they did start to get apprehensive. In fact, many people in the room would probably have seen this, I would say towards the end of last year. And I think it's a series of political things that they were watching and seeing, and they didn't like everything they saw, even though some of it was positive. I mean, the trade agenda, for example, doing CPP, TPP, was I think, a great thing for the new government to grab and actually bring home. That was a terrific thing to do. But, that came at the political cost of restrictions on foreign ownership of properties. And, investors didn't like that. They didn't like the minimum wage so early in the government's program. And then the oil and gas decision, certainly from what we could see from within NZIER, was pretty big. Everything about that decision said, not welcome to the business community generally. So there is something in the political economy that probably needs to be addressed. But we're certainly not Australia. I have an Australian colleague on a board that I sit on, and he told me there was a website that you can sign up to, which every half an hour will send you an SMS that tells you who the current Australian Prime Minister is, which was one up on me, because up to that point, I'd been using, as you sign on at work, we have to change them for security reasons every 3 months. So I thought, well, I'll use the Australian Prime Minister for that, and it worked out pretty well. To draw together a couple of things that Adrian and Kirk said, because one of the leitmotifs that's coming through here is this thing on climate change. I think we need to be aware of New Zealand's particular characteristics, because it's relevant to the policy that we frame to deal with climate change. What are emissions in New Zealand? There are actually only three things. There's generation, and then there's transport, and then there's agriculture. Now, we've done the first of those. We did hydro decades ago. We've got, renewable generation at 80 to 85% of the generation stack, depending on which season you're looking at. So we've done that one. That's in the bank. Now, we're told that EVs are going to fix the second one of those. So, when we're all whizzing around town in our electric vehicles, that's sweet as well. The third is really hard for New Zealand. That was agriculture, because we have great, as an economist would say, factor endowment for agriculture. We've got not many people, stacks of land, we're well watered. You look at those things and you think this is a country that, that should rely on agriculture. And that's the one, and because of that, because we depend so much on agriculture for our natural prosperity, that's the really, really hard one to deal with. And some of the prescriptions that Kirk has made, going towards the weightless economy, will certainly help us there. But that's our problem zone, those agricultural emissions, because here and now we depend on those a lot, and they haven't been correctly priced. I agree.
Which I think we can segue into this question here from the floor as well. What New Zealand industries will thrive if we're to achieve a zero carbon future by 2050? Anyone want to pick that up?
Almost all of the current, and one good thing about capitalism is probably only 20% of the actual companies that exist today will be existing by 2050. We churn rapidly and we create new ideas, opportunities. I would truly love to hope that we become a capital deeper country. At the moment we are a housing deep country, and we all know that doesn't make sense, because you can't go and eat your house, etc., and that's my only saving, and we're busy trying to get people into financial savings, aren't we? Yet we're terrified of the tax working group and what that might happen, because that might distort it back into something that looks kind of fair. That we're finance and saving and becoming capital deep is actually useful. But we get a bit confused, am I at home or at work, am I at home? But we're going to have an amazing country. This country has just got so much going for it. The world wants us to succeed, because if we can't, we're small, we're isolated, we're clean, we're green. Everyone goes, my God, this is terrible, this world. I want to go and live in New Zealand. So grab the opportunity. Price it, charge it properly. I'm quite keen to hear from Naomi about conduct and culture in your industry.
We are going to come to that very, very shortly, and looking at the RC as well and what we can learn from that. But Kirk, I think, wants right of reply for the subtle, not so subtle dig at the tax working group.
I wasn't going to cover that, actually. I just wanted to expand a little bit on what Adrian said about what New Zealand might look like under a carbon in a carbon neutral or carbon free. What it looks like is us actually, to Adrian's point, being able to price some of those products as premium products in a global market and being able to link that strongly back to the competitive advantage that we have of being carbon free or carbon neutral, whatever we like to call ourselves. And for that's our kind of real opportunity to move away from a heavily commodities-based, particularly in the agricultural space, and really start to, using those free trade agreements and the access to those markets, start to push much harder about what we have produced here in New Zealand. And at the same time, again, though, you think about the weightless exports where you take out the entire logistics costs out of your supply chains, and you've got companies that can scale up very fast. If you look at the speed at which Xero has become a very, very strong, a very big New Zealand company, we've got companies that are producing entertainment, for example, digital games and so on and so forth, that were 3 people in a bedroom 2 years ago, and now they're worth $150 million. That's our opportunity. So, I mean, I think, in that different environment, it's not all, there are some significant ways that we can probably price ourselves up to the premium that we should have been for the last 30 years.
Naomi, conduct and culture in your industry?
I guess what I would say, to pick up on Adrian's comments about short-termism, is we're in a long-term industry. We make promises to people today, come with us, and well into the future, we'll do some big, hairy things for you that are complex and significantly important and life-changing. But we have a culture of short-termism. So we have customers who want things to be quick and easy. I don't want to have to think about this. Don't bother me with the detail. I just want it to be fast. And so we have parts of the industry that have pandered to that instead of educating them out of that thought. And on the other hand, we've got companies where leadership tenure is short, where in-depth knowledge of the customer journey from when they buy right through to when we satisfy them is not there in the leadership. We've got deep chains of command where the people at the top haven't talked to a customer for 150 years, if ever. And we've got people driven by shareholder returns, we've got people driven by career outcomes, by profit, by bonuses, etc. So we've got long-term promises and short-term behaviours, and that's how you end up with conduct problems. Look around this room, all of these people in this room are really good people. And if anyone want a job, I would love to hire any of you that would like to come and be employed by Partners Live, because I truly think everyone in this room and the people who work for you are all good people, just like they were in a number of those companies in Australia. But they ended up deep somewhere in the middle, where the customer wasn't visible. And the default position then is shareholder returns and short-term profits, and do more of the same that keep your bosses happy. And that's what they're focused on as well. So I think conduct, really, for us to address it, needs there to be some, I guess, almost regulated, drop-dead things that you have to show. You have to make visible. And one is the value proposition to your longest held customer. So this focus on new business at any cost, how do we get more new business, and the people we've already got can continue to pay the costs of the business while we run around and get our kudos and our bonuses for the number of new customers that we sell. So the value proposition for your longest held customer should be something we have to show. And the other one is how we look after our lowest paid employee. So what kind of structures do we have in place to support people to grow and have careers and make the right decisions and be prepared to speak up? Because there was a lot of people that knew there was problems. They didn't like what was happening because they're good people just like you and me, but they didn't speak up because the structure didn't support them to do that. So I think if we focus on the longest held customer and the lowest paid employee, and we have to demonstrate that visibly, maybe that's a start to not allowing this sort of conduct thing to repeat. And it does repeat. It repeats every 7, 12, 20 years. I've been around long enough to have seen it over and over again, and it's always good people and good companies somehow ending up going the wrong way.
There was the question, bravo. There was a question there from the floor on that as well. What key regulatory policy settings need to change to ensure long-termism?
And that's a really difficult one, because I think that there was a lot of regulation in Australia that should have prevented the things that happened. But a regulator's not inside a business, and they never can be to the extent that the people inside the business are. So actually, I don't know how you regulate long-termism, but I do think that if you ask people to report on the right things, and we're now starting to talk about reporting your diversity stats and reporting, how many complaints that you've had from your customers, etc. I think visibility of that reporting, so we're no longer reporting on companies just on shareholder returns and profits, starts to change the conversation as well. I mean, if you have to air your dirty laundry publicly, you clean it up pretty quickly.
This is something Australia wasn't particularly good at. What are some of the other lessons that New Zealand can learn from the Royal Commission?
I think anything that delivers an outcome which has completely destroyed consumer confidence in an industry is a bad thing. And that's what the Royal Commission is doing in Australia. And so people who don't want to buy these products, who make every excuse not to have insurance for themselves, or I don't want to save, or can say, I knew they were all bastards, that's why I didn't do it, and not do it. And that's the worst thing of all for the country. So fixing the problems without completely destroying consumer confidence is a really important part of the role that our regulators need to play.
And that's what you're trying to do with
this is just beautiful music to my ears. I was underwhelmed by the applause, so obviously it's not resonating too heavy or far enough through the audience. Shall we have another go at applauding? Who and then I'll come and answer the question if I can remember what it was, of what we just heard. Let's give that a better go. And that was the power of the regulator, you see.
Saw a cultural shift then.
You would get things sorted in this room.
When I first turned up at the Reserve Bank this time round, it's the third dip of the Savaloy in the same sauce, never invite me to your cocktail function. Dirty man. I was immediately buttonholed to say, do we need a Royal Commission in New Zealand? Because it was already underway, getting into full swing, and you're right, it's the misconduct inquiry. It's just don't get in the way of a good headline. And I said, no, we don't. That was immediately interpreted as Mr. Ord is defending the banks and the insurance companies. On what grounds? What would he even know? What I was actually saying was, no, we don't need a Royal Commission, because they are highly ineffective and do exactly what Naomi's saying. They destroy the actual industry on behalf of supporting the industry. When you've got that misguided McCarthyism going on, it becomes too easy to get into real challenges. So what we being the Financial Markets Authority and the Reserve Bank, we settled up a posse, and we said we will get deeply involved on the ground with the banks first and now the insurance companies, and work really hard around understanding what are the moral compasses, guiding lights, navigation stars that can assist and create long-termism, and are they well embedded and good behaviour on the way through. Because I totally agree with you, regulation is all about stopping the last war. It's not about preventing the next one. Regulation is about market discipline, that transparency, watching each other, self-discipline, have I got enough skin in the game, and over the horizon that matters. And regulatory discipline is the poor third cousin. And in fact, it can actually operate against the market and the self-discipline. Australia is regulated up to the razoo. And we are told by wise people, including many of our regulated institutions, that we should be like APRA. Yet, isn't that the place where they're having these issues? So it's about trying to get that balance right. And it's really about the moral compass of the people in this room and the tunes you have to dance to that matter.
We'll pick up one of these questions again from the floor. How do we change the mindset that has money as the main outcome? Laurie, do you want to you want to pick up that one?
Do we really think that way? I mean, money is important. It gives you command over market resources. You know, that's a good thing. You sure notice if you don't have it. But I think, didn't Adrian say this at some point in his half-hour improvisation earlier this morning, that actually we're driven by all kinds of other things, and then, you know, not everything that has value is measured in dollars and traded in a market. You know, money isn't everything. We use it to bring about some of the outcomes that we want. But so I think I disagree with the question, which is probably very bad form from a platform. So I apologise. But no, I don't think I can't even see the question at this point as the main outcome. No, I don't live my life there. Does anybody? No? Okay.
It's a funny question for this industry because money is the main outcome, that the people who need it end up with the money when they need it. That's what we do. It's just the share of the money. Yeah, and how we make sure that money is there when it's needed. We haven't used it in another way on the journey through. So, like I said, we make long-term promises to people that will be there with the money, and it's making sure that they have the confidence and the outcome that they expect long after any of us in this room are still here in the jobs that we're in today.
I understand the tax working group is reporting back soon, and Kirk, you can't tell us too much as a member of that group, but could you give us a bit of an insight, just, you know, between us, what's going to come out of that report?
Sure. What I think I will do in order to answer that very nice question, Tova, is just give you a bit of an overview and a flavour of some of the things that might affect this industry, which we were pushing for, Business New Zealand were pushing for. And important for two reasons. One, because we've got some interesting issues in relation to overinvestment in housing. Two, because the future for savings in New Zealand will rely on people being able to have confidence in the system. So your points are really well made, Naomi. And three, so the reality for savings in New Zealand as a vehicle is that it's currently one of it's probably the second most heavily taxed in the OECD. So we really need to do something about that. Well, what we were pushing for is the fact that we really need to do something about that to change some of the perspectives. You can add a capital gains tax to investment properties, but if you don't provide incentives for people to save more and enable them to save more within those vehicles, you're not going to get a significant or seismic change in the way that we really want it in New Zealand and probably need it and deserve it. So that's just specifically on savings. That's where, you know, we're really pushing hard for some of those. Just to give you a sense of how challenging some of those decisions can be for a government, because what we've done is put together a package. The interim report doesn't provide recommendations as yet, the final report will, but just to give you a sense of some of the costs for government, if we were to move away from our current what is called the TTE model in terms of savings and transition out of that, when that was implemented, it basically paid for a reduction in the top personal tax rates from 66% so it was implemented in 1987. It funded the reduction of the top personal tax rates from 66%. So there's a lot of money at stake, and so it will be a real challenge for a government to change it. But what I would urge this industry to do is keep pushing really hard in this area because it's so critical.
Do you think to that end that the government could be blocked by the politics?
Not necessarily politics, but certainly the fiscals around it. But they can do it, and there's ways that a government could do it. They wouldn't have to do it all at once. They can transition to a slightly different model, which again taxes less in the income side and less in the vehicle side. And they can do stuff around KiwiSaver as well.
Laurie, did you want to pick up more broadly what the recommendations, when they do come, what that could mean for the tax system in New Zealand, perhaps some of the uncertainty as well that's creating?
I'm in the second part of that at the moment. I don't know what they're going to announce. Nothing has been announced. There has been some messaging that they want to do something that's fairer, but you know that leads you into all those definitional problems. What's fair? Fair to whom? Is what I regard as fair the same as what you regard as fair? So I honestly don't know. And that they've also said, and forgive me if I'm misquoting the group, Kirk, but that whatever they recommend will be neutral. And what that says to me is it'll be neutral at some high level, but the distribution within it will change quite a bit. So one group will be disadvantaged at the benefit of another group. Who those groups will be and how, I just don't have any insight. Haven't seen the detail. I'm waiting with bated breath.
One of the comment that I'd make, and I just wrote a note down when Adrian was talking, or improvising, as you said, Laurie, earlier, and talking about the share of labour income versus capital income and the shift in that. Now, one of the ways that you can change that is ensure that people who are only earning income from labour can actually get a share of the capital income, and that's through savings, and that's why it's so critical, I think, drawing that line together. So that's why, that can really, that thinking in terms of that decline in share of labour income is really driving a lot of this government's thinking, frankly, and that's the distributional stuff that you're talking about, Laurie.
Yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, it's often presented as a negative thing, but it's just a thing. You would want returns from capital to be higher, at least in the short to medium term, than they are from labour. We call that progress. That's replacing people with machines. In recent decades, that's replacing people with technology so that people get to do other things. But as with all these great adjustments, it's the adjustment that's really, really painful. And that's what we're thinking about at the moment. So I think some kind of measures like that, where maybe the people in this room could find some way to give people some kind of greater agency over how they plan the income flows that they'll need to get them through their 40 years and 10. That's 90. Yeah, well, we're heading that way. Then that would be a very good thing.
We're going to move on to consumer trust and confidence soon, but you were nodding fairly emphatically during both Laurie and Kirk's statements there. Adrian, did you want to add something?
No, I was nodding off.
Cheeky bugger.
Could you dim these lights a bit?
Turn up the fire.
Is the fire getting too hot? Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's exactly right. I mean, I totally agree. One of the biggest breakthrough moments in my economic history was that I discovered that investment, what the evil capitalists do, is the flip side of savings. What we do as humans, and we don't draw that line together enough. So if we aren't saving enough in financial forms, then we aren't sharing in the returns to the investment, the capital, and therein lies the rub. So I totally agree. Returns on capital, the fact they're going up is absolutely brilliant. Everyone needs to get some skin in the game. To do that, you have to save. Full stop.
Can I just add a piece which we also don't draw the line on? So we do quite a good job of trying to get employers to make KiwiSaver accessible to employees. Probably not as good as we could do, but we do quite a good thing. We do absolutely nothing to educate consumers and employees about the need to protect their income if it gets interrupted. So it's two halves of the same whole. The whole industry, life insurance and savings, is about getting a person to retirement with their money intact so they can retire financially sound. All we do is put some money in when their ability to earn the money to save is interrupted as a life insurance industry. But we as a country don't do anything to educate, but even explain those words to people about why the need for these products. And it is just as important because people's lives get interrupted. And if they get interrupted, not only do they need supporting today, which falls on the government or give a little, but what they were going to have in the future is also destroyed. So we need to talk about the two as they go hand in hand, and we need to figure out how to educate consumers about that's what insurance does.
Which I think covers off a bit around trust and confidence as well, and we've got the countdown clock now as well, just a few minutes to go, so can we all go to our crystal balls and our tea leaves and also the magnificent minds that we have on stage and talk a little bit about what the outlook looks like in the next 3 to 5 years.
Magnificent. Well, I mean, for the reasons that I outlined, I mean, I think we shortly are going to have more better quality access to markets across the world than we ever have before, and that's going to suit us really, really well. We won't be having to play in this commodities game, so I think it's pretty bright.
What I'm seeing, I think, is a slow shift in the to come back to where we started, the politics around all this. I mean, we're on the countdown, so it won't take much time from people. But who can tell me how many times the word business appeared in Grant Robertson's budget earlier this year? Have a guess. Who thinks it was greater than 50? No, it wasn't Adrian. Sorry, greater than 30. No, greater than 10. Also wrong. It was 5 times. It's a really interesting speech, actually, because it was exactly 6,000. We counted this back at the office. This is what we do on Wet Thursdays, right? So the
Control F, I think, is what he means.
Very controlled people. Yeah, a lot of us were never breastfed when we were children, and we carry that through our lives. But we counted it back at the office, and it's 6,005 words exactly long. And so the extra 5 words were that word business. I mean, I have a private theory about this, that Minister Robinson finished writing his speech, he was bang on his word count, and then he thought, I've got to do something that keeps Kirk Hope out of my office for at least the next few weeks, so I'll stick in business 5 times. But I think there's a shift, certainly in the government at the moment, and it's becoming more important to them. They realise that the business community is something that needs to be, if not kept sweet, at least understood and engaged, and I think that's really positive. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think the financial services industry is well served actually by the work that we're going through and the pain we're going through today. Because of the Royal Commission in Australia, the good work that we do will get seen because they're asking us to show them, and that's what we need to do. But also, it's reset the mindset, I think, for everybody who's looked at that and gone, oh my God, how could that have happened? To make sure, and I think that will help make sure that it doesn't happen here and continue to support the confidence in our industry that we've really had for quite some time.
Adrian, final word to you.
Warriors in the finals. Argentina put up a bigger fight than probably what the ABs thought, and Bowden Barrett will be back.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I just do what I think. I read, in fact, the other day, well, I read in the paper, could be fake news, that Australia's had 8 prime ministers since they last had the Bledisloe Cup. That's quite an interesting one. I believe, oh my God, the bomb's just gone off.
No. You don't get off that easy. We can go over for an extra minute.
Are you still here? I completely agree with Kirk around the trade, our openness. The world wants us to be successful. We have the capability to be successful completely within our grasp. It is us, it is you as business leaders who need to set that moral compass, think long term, suck it up, stop asking the regulator to come in and stop stupid things happening. Just stop doing it yourself. I sat across in an insurance industry group that I won't mention, who said, we're still going to keep sending people on holidays on these short-term contracts, because if we don't, I'll lose all my customers. Please just equally regulate us all at one go. I mean, grow up.
And we will end it there because the countdown clock is looking rather sinister and flashing at us red. A huge round of applause to this eminent panel, Adrian, Naomi, Laurie and Kirk.